Good morning. This is Dr. Bill Wyatt again, and I'm with the American Orthodontic Society, and I'm going to try to talk to you this morning about some forces that can fool you. And I have been fooled, and I'm sure that a lot of other people have been fooled also. This is an easy thing to happen to you, but let me show you and give you a few little tricks here that you might follow to keep from being trapped in the corner that I was trapped in. It's just almost impossible to know all the forces that the teeth exist and resist, and how they tend to move the teeth and also the jaws around, and it's difficult to just realize what they are. I've got about 3 or 4 little stories here I'll tell you about them and how they did. The first, I want to just show you some teeth that we have drew this out once to kind of illustrate how this happened to me. Now, I had a real nice little young lady, and she was Class 2, just locked in Class 2, and everything was going great, and it was coming right along, and she was wearing her elastics, and all this was going great. And then all of a sudden she developed a TMJ problem, and it started bothering her some. I could not figure out what on earth. Now, I had a hook down here, and I had a Class 2 elastic that went up something like this, and this is pulling the maxilla back, and it's also pulling the mandible forward. And now the joint back here began to hurt. Usually joints don't hurt at all if you move the jaw forward. That's what we do to help them in most of the cases, is move the jaw forward, and it gets the condyle, in other words the floss or something like that, and the condyle sitting up in here, and if you kind of move it forward a little bit, but if you push it backward, it gets back here on that retrodiscal tissue, and it starts bothering somebody who's very tender in this area, in the ears back in here somewhere. So this is the condyle, of course, coming up like that. And if you pull it forward, that helps most of them. And I thought, well, this Class 2 elastic is pulling this jaw forward, and it should be helping this. And I'm pushing back on this to actually bring this forward. And I beat my head against a rock trying to figure out how to do it. So I sent this young lady over to Dallas to Dr. Weldon Bell, who was a good friend, and he had written about 2 or 3 books on the temporomandibular joint and jaw movement and everything. He was an oral surgeon and a very fine gentleman, and just knew more about this than anybody. This was way back in the early days when there wasn't very much going on about TMJ. And then all of a sudden it started in, and Dr. Bell looked at this young lady and sent me a nice letter back. Says, I don't see anything you're doing here that's causing this TMJ problem. So I just proceeded on with the case, and after a few I don't know, it took several weeks or a couple of months or something, it quit hurting. And this went along fine. We finished the girl. We didn't have any problem at all. And I got to thinking about this and looking at this, and I see why this Class 2 elastic was hurting this young lady. And I don't remember whether I had a headgear on there or not, but the headgear would be pushing this back. Wouldn't have anything to do, I thought, with the lower arch, but it actually did. Now, also, there was another guy who was pretty prominent in GP orthodontics and stuff, was saying that headgears actually cause TMJ work. Now the headgear doesn't cause the TMJ work, but he was saying it was. Now he was pushing the teeth, the upper teeth back with the headgear, and the person came down with a TMJ problem, and so he said headgears cause TMJ problems. And I thought, well, now that's crazy. The headgear can't cause the TMJ problem. But then I got to looking at it a little closer, and finally it dawned on me what was actually happening in cases that are interlocked, that are really class 2, and you've got interdigitation. It really goes. If you push the maxilla back just a wee bit, a millimeter or two, then you cause the persons, when they bite, there's contact on the mesial cusp of the molars and the bicuspids and everything, and until you get over the hump, this force is quite big on people who close to and swallow properly and press their teeth together every time they swallow, or grind their teeth, or have clenching, or whatever it is. And if you push this part back just a millimeter or two, you get this point up here, and it comes down and hits, and then goes down, and it pushes the mandible back. And in people who have a weak joint to start with, this will actually set off TMJ work. It's not the headgear, and it's not the Class 2 elastics. It is the fact that you're backing this jaw up because of the contact in here. Now, if you take this and go on to the next step in this, like now this has gone over the hump. Now I've had people that put Class 2 elastics on. I'm going to go back on that show. Put Class 2 elastics on, and they wore them faithfully, and yet I remember I had a good friend who we're great friends now, but back then we kind of competed with each other, and he had a patient that came in, and he put these elastics on her. She was Class 2, and she came back in a few weeks, and it was still there, and she wore them another month, and it's still there. And he just flat told the lady, "So you're not wearing these elastics." Well, it happened that the lady really was wearing the elastics, and she couldn't get the lower arch up over the hump, and it would come right up out here, and then it would relapse back again and back, and she couldn't get it over the hump. And he just swore up and down she wasn't wearing them, and they got mad at him, and the lady came over to see me, and I looked at it, and I had gone through this, and I knew what was taking place, and so I told the man and the lady, it's all right, you go back to him, he's doing all right. He just hadn't got the teeth over the hump. And I showed her what she could do, and I didn't talk with the orthodontist, but I'm sure that she went back and she wore them enough to get it over the hump. Now once they get over the hump, boy, they're in Class 1 just almost immediately. So I'm going to go to that video again. You see that came up this side, it got up here, and now it starts down the other side. Now they will move their jaw here. When they bite to it, moves the jaw forward, and then they don't have any TMJ problem at all. It just goes away, and they bite forward, and the teeth interlock it and hold them in this position. Now you want to keep on doing this and working on them, even though look like they're class 1, you need to get them really back in here so that these cusps are down in there without actually moving them down in that interdigitation in there. So this is a little trick you need to know if you're treating patients when their permanent teeth come in and they have lots of cuspal length and they can get locked in like that. Now, if you want to avoid this whole thing and take that away from the people, where Class 2 elastics can't have any effect on it, and headgears don't have any effect, and it is so much easier to do a Class 2 case if you do this. Now, this is a little thick, but you can take just a small amount of acrylic, and I'll use that acrylic that's just light cured, you know, and everything, and don't etch it too much, and put it in there, and then have them close too, and then grind away everything except where that cusp touches down here. And now you can put a Class 2 elastic, and it will work much easier, and that will help you in correcting your Class 2 problems or your Class 3 problems if you're dragging them either way, where they've got steep cusp. If you just cover this area down here where the cusp cannot lock them in the position they're in, and you want to move out of that, and they won't have any problem because it just doesn't have any effect on the joint back here. Now, this is a little trick that you really ought to know about. Forces in the teeth are hard to come up with, and I put that on the heading of this, and I wanted to mention this one. I had a 43-year-old man come in to me, and he had his upper front teeth were sticking out like he had sucked his thumb or had some instrument or something in there prized his upper teeth. The teeth moved out, and by the way, the bone went with the teeth as they moved. And I looked at him and I talked with him. I said, well, I don't think you're sucking your thumb, and you don't chew on a cigar up in the front of your mouth or bite on some kind of instrument or something there that's pushing these teeth out. And neither one of us could figure out. I knew something had to be going on. He wasn't a tongue thruster either. And, but something, he said his teeth were perfectly straight about 2 years before that, and now they had moved out like he had been sucking his thumb. And I just couldn't figure it out, and he couldn't either, and we talked about it, and I left, but I left one of my ladies in the room there with him, and I went to check on somebody else I was getting behind, and she came back in there and says, we figured it out. And I dropped back in there, and he had been putting lozenges in. He wanted to stop smoking, and somebody told him, if you'll hold these lozenges up in the roof of your mouth there in the front and just put them over your tongue and keep them in place. And that's what he had been doing for a year or so to stop smoking, and putting these lozenges up there. So the tongue had actually pushed these teeth out, holding this lozenge up here in the roof of the mouth. And that's all the force it took to move this man who's 43 years old. And it moved his front teeth out just with the tongue coming up there. Now, people bite certain things. They do all sorts of crazy things with their teeth. They're biting their fingernails. Puts a lot of load on the joint back here. You know, you got the load here, and on the front teeth, that's where you're biting. And that load is here and back on the joint. And that hurts the jaw joint. So people have pain with the jawbone. A lot of times it bite their teeth together like that, or to chew their fingernails all the time. There's just a lot of things like that. So I hope you will take this information and use it, this little trick of just watching what people do. Try to get them to tell you everything, and then you know what has to happen. Force moves teeth. And it doesn't seem to matter whether they're 90 years old or 2 years old, or even before that. I mean, forces move teeth all of our life. Now, an ankylosed tooth doesn't move in the bone around it, but if you put force in there and move the whole bony structure around there, the ankylosed tooth will move. If you move the bus and it's on the bus, it moves too. But moving it around in the bone itself right there is very difficult. And when they're badly impacted and you've got to do something, I have an old surgeon go in and luxate them, and I'm able to take a ankylosed cuspid, and if you break it loose and don't pull on it too hard, it'll move, and you can move it up, and then I guess get it stable in an area, and it probably ankyloses again, if that's the right word to say. So I appreciate you dropping in and listening to this, and I hope this video will help you sometimes in doing that. But if you got somebody with a deep cusp and they're locked in class 2, if you just put just a little acrylic down in the groove there, let it bite down and then grind away most of it, and have this light cured triad type acrylic, you can pop it out away from the teeth. Don't go in there and put a lot of composite in there. You'll be grinding it out of the teeth for hours later. So anyway, this is a big help in doing class 2 correction, or if you're trying to slide the mandible back, but it's very careful. Don't slide the mandible, because you remember you're going to push the condyle up against the retrodiscal tissue, and you can create a TMJ problem real easy that way. So it's best, if the lower jaw is too far forward, bring the upper jaw out over it so you can chew with the jaw in that good position back here. Thank you a lot, and I hope you are able to use this, and it really is a helpful little hint here. So I will sign off here and see you at a later date. At this point, let me move my little arrow over to the stopping point here.